In this video, we'll be showing you how to assemble your Nissan Leaf EM57 motor to your Mazda Miata 5 or 6-speed manual transmission using your Evolution Motor Company adapter plate. Okay, so when we're building up this adapter plate, when we're getting ready to mate the transmission to the motor itself, first thing we gotta do is get in here to the transmission and clean up a few things. So you always want to change out the seal behind this front portion of the transmission. That's for the 5-speed and the 6-speed. They are two different configurations. The 5-speed takes a gasket and a seal, whereas the 6-speed, which is what this is, just has a seal behind there. Alright, so once we clean up all the gasket material on this cover and on the transmission itself, then we go ahead and get our seal out. We're only using the OEM seals here just to make sure we get the best quality. Go ahead and put a new seal into this area. RTV it back together and torque all the fasteners to 18 foot-pounds. Coming around to the back side, you also want to replace this seal here. Alright, so once you get the old seal out, you grab the new seal. One thing to mention is that there's these little bumps right here. There's two here and there's one here on the top. So this is up. I just kind of go in and just tap around the circumference of this thing, 180 degrees out. Just keep tapping it in until it seats. Next up is we can start working on the adapter itself. This particular plate is actually for the Miata transmission. So these little pins here, they actually locate in these holes here, these little counter bores here. Okay, next up you're going to want to get 10 of these 5/16 24 1 1/4 long socket head cap screws and 10 of the 5/16 washers. Alright, so we're going to grab the ring here. So you'll flip it over, make sure that these pins are facing down, make sure that your ring is placed here on this surface with the word motor facing up. So you'll take each one of these fasteners, put a washer on it, you'll line up with the threaded holes. So this threaded hole and all the subsequent ones will align with these counter bores right here. So get all these just started in with the Loctite. Remember to go in a crisscross pattern, and then your final torque needs to be 18 foot-pounds, which is also about 221 inch-pounds if you don't have a foot-pound torque wrench. Okay, for the next step, go ahead and prep by just getting a couple of these M12 by 175 screws, the 65 long millimeter ones. As we talked about before, there's these OEM Mazda pins, and they just line up right here into these counter bores. So this thing should just basically just snap right in place. Go ahead and put these screws and nuts on just to secure it in place. Actually put two here on the top and then just put one here on the bottom just to make sure that everything is seated flush, because we're going to do some bearing alignment. Next up, you're going to need this bearing housing. Bearing is going to go into this counter bore here. So this is a sealed bearing, but it's also a angular contact bearing. That means that it can actually take axial loads. That means that it can take forces axially like this. Most ball bearings just take radial loads in this direction. But this is a particularly special kind of configuration meant to take both radial and axial loads. We need that because this is going to actually take up a lot of the force that's generated by the clutch. When the clutch pedal is depressed, the clutch springs will press axially, and this bearing needs to, while it's also spinning, take that amount of load. It's by Worldwide Bearings. It's high-speed ceramic ball bearing. You'll notice that one end on this inner race, this is the inner race. You'll notice that, pay attention to this overall thickness right here. This is one end, this is the load end. This is the side that will face in towards the transmission, because that's the way the forces are applied. Notice how much thinner this one is. So this is thin on that inner race. This is a little thicker on that inner race. So that means that this side of the bearing, it's directional. That means that this side of the bearing is going to face inward like this, okay? So the thick inner race faces inward. So this is pretty much a slip fit. This part precision machined is going to fit with the counter bore facing inward towards the transmission. So that means, so if this part is facing in towards the transmission, then that means your fat inner race needs to face away from this surface, and it is a slip fit, so you're gonna have to make sure you get it indexed just right, otherwise it's gonna get bound up in there. I actually recommend just putting a little bit of grease on that inner bore and get it to slip just right down in there. You can put a little bit on the race OD if you want. Sometimes there's a little bit of residual grease on the bearing, and you can just use that, but I just get a little bit of grease, put it on that inner bore, and then just a fine film. Don't cake it in there. And then another film on this outer race, and this dude will slide right in there. You'll also notice that it will stand up just a little bit proud of this surface. It's kind of hard to tell, but this outer race is meant to stand just a little bit proud of this surface. That's so that when this is all bolted together, that outer race is going to seat on this plate, so that'll sandwich it all together. Okay, next up, you're going to need some 1032 fasteners, 8 of them. These are the 1.5 inch long 1032s, and you'll need 8 of the corresponding washers. A couple things I want to draw your attention to. You'll notice these washers here, they're kind of thick compared to standard washers, and I'll show you why that is. So if we put this fastener in there, you'll notice there's a lot of play. There's a lot of play in this hole, and that's to allow this whole assembly to float and get aligned just right with the shaft. With the shaft here, there's an alignment tool that comes with the kit, and it allows you to line this shaft up to the inner diameter of this bearing. And so this extra slop in here allows that whole plate to float, but then to take it to add the structural integrity back, because you don't have a lot of area that you're overlapping with the standard washer. We use this extra thick washer so that it can take all the preload and still maintain all the structural integrity, make sure that you don't gap or slip this joint when it's subjected to shock and vibration environments. Okay, so I'll just put 3 screws in here and just make it so that they're just finger tight, not even finger tight, just slip in there. And you'll see what I'm saying, how this thing can kind of float around. That's intentional. We're going to use a tool that indexes on this diameter and then locates on the splines of the shaft there in the transmission. Once you do that, then you'll put these fasteners in, torque them down with Loctite on their threads, and then pull these out, Loctite those, and then torque those down. So this is the tool here, the alignment tool. It's just one tool that's needed to align that bearing to both the Nissan Leaf and the Miata drive shafts. So the spline shafts go in here. There's 2 different diameters. It's kind of hard to see in there, but there's 2 different diameters that locate on the shafts of the 2 different, the one of the motor and the one of the transmission. And then these are precision machined diameters that engage with the inner diameter of the bearing, but at different depths because the shafts are different lengths. I recommend taking just a little bit of grease, putting them on these diameters, just so that it fits and comes out more easily, because again, this is a precision fit, can also get a little bound up. So go ahead and put just a little bit of grease or oil on those bearing surfaces. Okay, so when you put this tool into the bore of the bearing, when you're aligning to the transmission shaft, the bore will locate on this diameter here. So it's best to put the oil on both of these, or the grease on both of these diameters. So you'll get it kind of in there. It's a slip fit, and then at this point it'll engage with not only the bearing but also with the shaft of the transmission itself. And you'll notice that there's still a little bit of play. This is all play that already exists in the transmission input shaft. This already is there. It's there from the factory that way. So the whole goal here is to find a reference for this inner diameter as it relates to that shaft. So we're setting that right now. So anything in this area, I like to just kind of find the middle of the wiggle. You can even kind of look down in there at some of the other threaded holes just kind of get it to where you're not all the way to one side of the wiggle or all the way to the other side. Just get it kind of right in the middle. This isn't massively critical. We're just trying to set this at some position right now that we can then reference with the motor. So just move it around, try to maybe get that hole lined up right in the middle, the threaded hole in the middle of the through hole, and then go ahead and tighten down these screws that are already there, and then go ahead and put the rest of the screws in with Loctite. So I want to point something out about the play in this shaft that exists from the factory. You'll notice that there's just a little bit of play in there already from the factory. So this is a little bit of play that allows for ease of assembly. So when we're aligning our bearing, we're aligning it to the outer diameter of these splines. So you'll see that when we put the tool on, it's a slip fit, but it also kind of, you can see that it kind of moves. It's amplified because we have a much longer distance here. So you can see there is some movement in that shaft. So that's all meant to be there, but all we want to do is align our bearing to this diameter on the splines, outer diameter, but then also align it within that factory, I call it slop, that factory play in the shaft itself. So that's what we're going for. All right, so again, move this around so that you get the slop right in the middle of the hole, or at least just not so that you're on one side or the other. Then go ahead and one at a time, just lightly tighten these guys up until they're, and just keep going in a pattern, maybe do it in like 3 passes. Just get this so this is nice and centered up, and then each one of these fasteners is torqued. Not to any particular value just yet, just I've been using this driver here. So just use a driver, give it a little bit of a torque, and do that in about 3 passes, and then you'll notice that the hole, I don't know if you can kind of see, you can kind of see a little bit, but our threaded hole is kind of right in the middle of the counter bore, and you'll want to get it just in the ballpark there. And once this is all lined up and you've got those fasteners finger tight, or at least with the tool, then we're going to go ahead, take the rest of these fasteners, put a little Loctite on them, run them into these other holes in a star pattern, 1, 2, 3, and then once you get those 3 in, then you can probably take that one out and torque it, that one torque it, that one torque it, then that one. But just again, just in a star pattern, you want to make sure there's Loctite on all of these, and then torque it to the appropriate value. All right, so we should be looking like this. All these fasteners are torqued, 35 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. And at this point, this is all aligned, so you can pull this out. So next up, we can pull this adapter plate off. So go ahead and remove these fasteners here, and you can pull the whole plate off. We're going to go over to the Leaf motor and do some alignment over there. And so you've got your inverter and motor assembly, and right here we've got the Leaf plate itself. So much like the Miata transmission, you've got the dowel pins that are here, and those will align into these counter bores in the motor themselves. So if we're looking at it like this, here's the side with the pins. Flip it over this way. This little flange, or this ear that sticks off, is on the left hand side. You'll go ahead and put everything down, and once again, everything should align nicely. Those pins, those dowel pins, align everything, and everything snaps right into place. Precision fit, good to go. All right, so I've got the Miata plate that we assembled earlier. I brought it over here to the Leaf motor. You'll notice here the words that say motor. This is why we put that side up, because this is the side that's going to face the Leaf motor. So grab one of these M10 socket head cap screws. This one's the 80mm long one. Get a washer, throw that in there too. Just put one here. This one here is the through hole, so you'll need a nut down there on the bottom. So get yourself an M10 nut. This is the shorter 65mm. This is going in this hole. This is not a through hole. It's a blind hole, so it'll just thread in to the motor threads that are already there. So just snug these up hand tight. You don't need to wrench them down too much. and just to make sure that everything is secure and ready for alignment. So you can do this a couple different ways. I actually like to just put this on first, and then once the tool is on, then you can just put the other assembly that we just built over top of this, and it'll align everything that you need. Okay, so I'm gonna try to just hold the camera here while we do this. So you'll notice we're gonna align the tool. So there's the tool. We have it already on the shaft itself. Then we'll come here, align everything up. Everything will go through the bearing bore. And now everything's aligned. You'll notice that all these holes down in the counter bore, they're all pretty well lined up. That's the intent here. So we can come in here now, put fasteners in each of these holes, the 5/16/24s again, and torque those down to 18 foot-pounds just like we did the other side. Put a couple screws in. I put these two in, but then, you know, just to make sure that everything's centered up, and also pay attention to this flat here. Make sure that it's as parallel as you can make it to the top of the motor, just for aesthetics, because there's slop in the hole here, so that you can actually move this around. See how it kind of moves around? That's so that you can make sure that there's enough movement in this plate to the mating part, so that everything can line up to this. So there's just built-in slop to this clearance hole, so that you can make sure everything's aligned. But now that it's all aligned, you can rotate it like this. So just make sure that everything looks nice, that this is parallel to the top of the motor, that kind of thing. And then you can go ahead and snug up like 3, maybe 4 of these bolts, and then put the rest of them in there. And then again, we'll tighten them up to the 18 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. You can then pull the alignment tool out, and now we're all centered up. Next, we're going to go ahead and assemble the adapter to hold the flywheel. So in order to do that, we need to remove this whole assembly from the motor itself. And you might be wondering how we're going to do that, because we bolted down that plate here and on the other side there. But there's these clearance holes that we built in intentionally. So you'll notice right here, there's an access hole that you can fit your wrench in, and you can go ahead and take that out. And those access holes are built throughout. So you'll notice there's another one here and here. They're all over. Clearances, just to make sure that we can put in every fastener into the leaf plate easily. All right, so we've taken the adapter assembly off, and we've moved it over here to the bench. And what we're going to do now is take this flywheel adapter and install that. So you'll need to get some snap ring pliers here, and in your kit should have come a snap ring as well. So one thing I want to point out is this groove right here. There's a snap ring groove right here in the end of the adapter itself. So that's going to protrude just past the bearing, so that you can fit the snap ring in, and everything will be secured that way. So you'll remember that this diameter goes into the ID of the bearing itself. All right, so we've got the snap ring here on the snap ring pliers, just like every other snap ring. You can kind of fit it on here, and everything will be good to go. There we go. So now we're in. So what this looks like now is you've got this flange here. This flange here is what accepts the flywheel, and this set of splines here engages with the leaf splines coming out of the motor. All right, so once again, we're back here with the leaf motor. I've got the adapter assembly in my hands. So once again, you're just aligning the splines. Once you get the splines aligned, then you align the dowel pins to the leaf motor itself, and now this thing is in there. And then now all you got to do is just drop in all those fasteners that we showed you earlier with all these clearance holes, and tighten them up. All right, so one thing to keep in mind is that this through hole cannot fit this washer in, so you have to put the washer in underneath first. Then you can drop the screw on. Of course, after you put the Loctite on, put some Loctite on there. Then you drop the screw in, and you're ready to go. And it's like that for all these. So you just got to fish the washer in down underneath. That's just so that we can make this hole as small as it can be, just because, like, especially here, there's some wall thickness that we wanted to maintain. Same thing with here. Okay, so once all the fasteners are installed, you're going to want to torque every one of them to 30 foot-pounds. All right, so next up, we're going to go ahead and press in the replacement bearing into the flywheel. Also degrease this a little bit. There's some machining oil on there. And do the same thing with the pressure plate. So then we'll go ahead and put this on the motor. Okay, so we've got the flywheel all placed down onto that adapter. And next we're going to make sure these holes are aligned, and you just run all the fasteners in there. And I like to use this torque stick. So this one here, 75 foot-pounds. That's right in the range of this torque spec for these fasteners. So we'll put Loctite on all of them and run these down to 75 foot-pounds. Next up, we're going to put the clutch in. So that will go on with this kind of protruded end facing out. So put that guy on there. And then follow up with the pressure plate. So here's our pressure plate. That guy goes on here. You're going to have to find the right orientation for these dowel pins. You'll notice that there's 3 dowel pins that align with these holes. Mine is totally screwed up, but you'll kind of see what that means. I'll do it real quick and then I'll show you. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So there's 3 pins on the flywheel. There's 1, 2, and then here's the 3rd one. And then just make sure that all the holes line up, all the threaded holes line up. And once you've ensured that's good to go, you'll want to align the splines to the bearing in the end of the flywheel. So your clutch kit should come with something that looks like this, just an alignment tool. I also have this chunk that I cut off of a blown up transmission. I use that too, but actually this plastic one does pretty well. It aligns it pretty well. So pick your poison and go ahead and I'm going to use the shaft from the transmission. And you just kind of place it in, make sure that it goes through the splines, and then I'll of course make sure it engages with the actual bearing itself down on the flywheel. So there we go. So now we're in. From here, you can go in and put all your fasteners in. Of course, make sure they're clean. Make sure you throw some blue Loctite on there and torque them to spec. All right, so we go ahead and we torque these down 20 foot-pounds, or I think that's what, 240 inch-pounds. And it is a little challenging, a little hard to hold this in place, but it's possible. One tip is to actually get your torque wrench so that it's kind of facing more inward, kind of like this, like clocked like this, and then hold the steering, or the hold it like this. So basically you're kind of, your arm and the torque wrench, if they're parallel to one another, that tends to work pretty good. Or just get a buddy or somebody to help you out, but it can be done. Also, make sure you got plenty of free play with that. This thing can come in and out easily. If that can't come in and out because it's not aligned properly, then you'll never get the transmission. You'll never get the transmission in. Okay, so next up, we're going to replace this throwout bearing, put a new one on. So make sure you put a little bit of grease on this surface here, and also on this surface here. And then we'll go ahead and install all this. You might want to make sure there's a little bit of grease here. And then also don't forget your spring. Place your spring, goes in the bottom side here. One more thing, don't forget to replace this boot, or at least clean the old one up. If it's torn, might as well get another one. All right, so your assembly should look like this. You got to kind of fish this through the opening in the boot there. Real easy. Of course, make sure you got grease on the other side of here. Here's your spring. Everything just kind of snaps into place. And then this kind of hooks over the fork here and then slides over that aluminum shaft that's there. So you should have free movement. It should move very smoothly. This is what's going to engage and disengage your clutch. Finally, make sure that this surface is super clean, that there's no dirt or grease or anything like on there. So this is the mating surface that the transmission is going to go on. Make sure it's nice and clean. And remember, these pins right here, they locate in those counterbores in the transmission case. So make sure that as you're dropping it down And I don't know that I'm going to be able to video this very easily, but I like to bring the transmission down from the top this way. So face your motor up this way. Make sure that maybe if you have a friend or somebody to kind of help guide it so that the shaft locates right here into the clutch itself, into these splines. But you'll kind of have to rock it like this and a little bit of rotation as well to make sure that everything lines up. And it should slide right into the splines, and then it'll bottom out, and you'll have to clock it one way or the other to make sure that these pins slide right into the transmission counterbores. So this is what you should wind up having. The way I do it is I just kind of bear hug this thing around here with both arms, straddle it on either side with my legs, and just lower it down over the shaft. And you can kind of, if you kind of rock it, you know, pitch yaw and roll it, it'll just kind of fall into place. Pay close attention to these holes, these top ones, and then these ones here where the alignment pins are. Just pay attention to where you can look right through them, and you can see where everything is clocked. Once it's there, you'll notice, I mean, this gap is closed up. Okay, so now that we've got the transmission mounted up, we go ahead and populate these bolts here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 M12s, and we'll torque those to 65 foot-pounds. One thing I want to point out is we're not going to put one in here. In fact, Mazda doesn't put one here or here. We're going to go ahead and just throw one in on this side just for the hell of it. One thing I want to point out is we will put M10s in this one, and this is where the starter goes. But you'll notice that this hole doesn't line up with this one. So this is on the 6-speed configuration only. This adapter plate is meant to accept a 5-speed manual and a 6-speed manual. Everything is the same except this hole. On the 6-speed, it's just a little bit out of place. On the 5-speed, it's here. So this adapter plate, all these holes line up just right for the 5-speed, but at the 6-speed, we don't use this one, and that's okay. Structurally, everything is fine. I chose that because the 5-speed is more ubiquitous. There's a lot more of them. They're a lot cheaper, so I assume that more people will run the 5-speed transmission, and as long as you're not hot rodding it too much, it should be able to hang with most of these motors, especially the 80 kilowatt, the 80 and 110 kilowatt. Once you start going up to the 110 kilowatt, which this is, you're going to want to run a 6-speed manual. It's because it can handle a little bit more power. So don't be alarmed by this. It's all good. It's meant to be that way. Okay, so we've got our M12 bolts in, and there's a couple up here, a few more on the other side. These are where the M10s go. So 2 M10s for the 6-speed. You can put all 3 of these in here for the 5-speed, and we're going to torque these to 55 foot-pounds. Okay, next up is the motor mounts. So you'll need these carriage bolts. Each motor mount uses 4 carriage bolts, and the carriage bolts go in here from the bottom side or the back side. This is only one of the motor mounts, but they both go together the same. So you'll put the carriage bolt in. You'll notice this rectangular cutout here accepts the rectangular shoulder of the carriage bolt. So you'll go ahead and put that in, flip it back over. You'll add the nut here to the threads, and then that will allow you to slide this thing back and forth. I'll show you here in a second for any sort of adjustments. All right, so we've got the last nut and bolt in. You'll notice these slides here, these slots, allows you to move the motor mount back and forth. And then when you get it in the position you need, you just tighten these up and it'll lock it in place. And I'll show you how this particular side mounts to the motor. You'll see these holes here. There's this one and this one. Those will align with these 2 holes here. And then these 2 back holes here and here align with these holes in the back part of the mount. So we'll start with the front ones. These are the M12s, 80 millimeters long. These are the ones you'll need for these forward holes here. We've got these M12 fasteners here in the front. These are the 80 millimeter long ones, all Loctited and torqued down to 35 foot-pounds. Then these ones here in the back here, these are the 35 millimeter long M10s with a nut here on the back, Loctited, and those are also torqued to 35 foot-pounds. Okay, just like the driver's side mount, we're going to take the passenger side motor mount. Okay, so this is what it should look like. One thing to keep in mind is that the bushing mount, you can see it's kind of angled up. It's not centered. That's intentional. But just know that the top of this motor mount has the 2 holes up top and just the single hole down here on the bottom. Okay, so we've got our motor mount over here. It will use these holes here, 1, 2, 3, to mount that motor mount to, and we're going to use these M10 by 25 millimeter long fasteners to secure these into the motor itself. Okay, so this is what you should be looking like here on the passenger side. All 3 of those fasteners torqued to 30 foot-pounds and Loctited in. One thing I want to point out as well is there's a hole here for Zerk fitting, and we'll be populating those as well. Okay, so here I wanted to show you how to mount the transmission mount that comes with the kit. So there's this U-channel that's bent, and it goes right here on the tail shaft housing. So this is a scrap piece of the scrapped out tail shaft housing from a blown up transmission. You'll see the tail shaft here and the shifter housing here. So if you come down here to the bottom, there's these 2 mounting holes from the factory. So the bracket will line up with these holes here, and you'll use the factory fasteners that are M10s, fine thread. So you can just go ahead and thread that bracket into here, Loctite it up, and you're good to go. And so under here is what I was showing you just a moment ago. This is where we're going to mount this bracket here. Go ahead and Loctite them up, and we're going to go to 30 foot-pounds. Okay, so last part of this is the transmission mount itself. So the transmission mount comes with this standoff here, and also the mount itself goes over top. So what you'll put on first is that initial standoff, then you'll put the mount on over top. So it'll look, I'll show you a picture of it once we get it on there, but it'll be upside down like this. So this top little recessed area clears the heads of the fasteners we just put in, and then the 1/2-13 nut and bolt secure these end holes in here into the transmission mount itself. I'll show you a picture of that. Okay, so this is the final setup here. You'll notice we've got all our fasteners torqued in, 50 foot-pounds on these 1/2-13 screws, and you'll see what it looks like here on the bottom. So you've got both the shim and the mount all in there. So it should be looking like this.